Yes, it's a privilege to be presenting here. I was actually here 18 months ago and I presented the first of my case studies, which was based on research in an international school in India. And today I'm happy to announce that I've actually finished my PhD study and I'm presenting the collation summation of all three case studies, thank you, which includes India, China and Thailand. Now the research examined how international baccalaureate subject teachers integrated a course that's called Theory of Knowledge in their teaching. The International Baccalaureate, in case you don't know a bit of background to it, it's probably regarded as the largest multinational, transnational educational organisation in the world at the moment. It's established itself in schools, primary schools, high schools, in over 150 countries. There's over 4,000 schools at the moment that offer the IB program as a rival to whatever the mainstream program is in that particular country. And especially in Asia, in the Asia Pacific region, it's growing exponentially, especially in countries like India and China where there's been increasing popularity. And the Theory of Knowledge course, I'm going backwards, is a core subject, so it must be taught by subject teachers within what we call the diploma program. So the International Baccalaureate has 4 programs. It's got what we call the primary years program, that's for primary schools. It's got the middle years program, so that's for around 11-year-olds to 15-year-olds. And then it's got the diploma program, which is the pre-university course. So you're looking between 16 to 19-year-olds. And the Theory of Knowledge course relates to the diploma program, the pre-university course. And it's considered, because everyone has to study it, it's a core component. There's all these metaphors for it, the heart and mind, or the jewel of the crown, and so forth. It has an ambitious aim in trying to foster and nurture international mindedness and achieve the overarching objective of responsible global citizens. And its interdisciplinary nature highlights the way that it embraces STEAM, because students basically look at questions, and I'll give you some examples of these questions, that looks at ways of knowing. So for example, the role of logic, the role of emotion, the role of imagination, faith, intuition, memory, sense perception, and so forth, and how that relates to different areas of knowledge within and across areas of knowledge, so making connections. So for example, the natural sciences, mathematics, and the arts. So examples of such questions that should be discussed in the normal classroom. And the idea is that teachers should not just focus on teaching syllabus content. So discussion in the classroom should go beyond just teaching facts and figures and whatever the prescribed syllabus states. So it's discussing quite provocative questions. So for example, I mean, there's an infinite number of questions. I've just picked a few, especially with a bit of a STEAM focus to them. So how do we distinguish science from pseudoscience? That could be a good discussion to get some high-ordered thinking among students in the science classroom. That could be in chemistry, that could be in biology, that could be in physics, it could be in physical education that has a scientific basis, it could be in different types of subjects. How do artistic judgments differ from other types of judgments, such as moral judgments? If scientists disagree, how do we distinguish between that, or how do we decide between competing knowledge claims? That could be natural scientists, that could be human scientists, so it's quite broad there. Is it easy to lie with statistics? So tapping into mathematics. And for example, the last one here, are ways of knowing employed in radically different ways in the arts than in other areas of knowledge? Suddenly, discussions in the classroom don't just centre in the subject. So they need to start making, so the artists might need to make connections with the sciences, or with ethics, or with mathematics. And it's getting that broader type of discussion, that higher ordered thinking, that's quite important. The literature, however, has consistently showed that teachers, diploma teachers that teach the International Baccalaureate, are often confused and have a lack of confidence when trying to integrate this theory of knowledge course in their teaching. Okay, so that comes up as a recurrent theme, and there are many scholars who actually even questioned the appropriateness of this course in what they call non-Western contexts. Okay, so this is a bit of a provocative term, but it is used much in the literature. So the idea is that the International Baccalaureate has very strong European traditions. It started in the 1960s, and based on in Switzerland, and also with a strong Oxford tradition. And some scholars actually say, well, this very Western humanist tradition makes it incompatible for non-Western contexts like schools in India, in China and Thailand. So that's some of the key findings. I mean, there's much more. I'm just cherry-picking the main ones from the literature review. However, what we are seeing is an unparalleled surge in international schooling, where parents and students are choosing not their mainstream schools. So say for in India, they're not choosing to go to an Indian board school to do the SSC. They're choosing, a lot of them are now choosing these IB schools, International Baccalaureate schools, or in China not to do the Gaokao, which is the pre-university system there, which is quite competitive. They're actually choosing to go into an international IB school, which means they do a different pre-university course. And there's little research to determine how teachers are interpreting this course and how effectively they are integrating it into their teaching. So that was a motivation, and because I'm a teacher as well, I teach at an international school in Australia, and I also lecture. This was a PhD study at the University of Sydney, but I lecture at two other universities, the Australian Catholic University and the University of Notre Dame. I was able to utilise those connections in order to tap into these schools. I do a lot of workshops for the IB as well. So I had these connections in India, Thailand and China. So the overarching research question was how IB teachers integrate theory of knowledge in teaching, and basically it was broken up into how teachers perceive the role of theory of knowledge, what they thought the benefits were, what they thought the key challenges were, and measures that could be adopted for the successful integration of the course. Another key piece of literature, which was a very useful model in how teachers might interpret theory of knowledge. So in a nutshell, it was envisioned or predicted, hypothesised that teachers could either say, you know what, this is all too hard, I'm not going to do it, I just want to do the syllabus, whatever the syllabus says, just teach that. I'm not going to get into these flowery discussions. So that falls under what we call the transmission model, where a teacher is only interested in transmitting what the syllabus states. It could also be interpreted as a transaction model, where teachers do show a genuine interest and attempt to integrate the theory of knowledge course by stimulating dialogue in the classroom. And there could be even a higher level than that, where the dialogue actually results in them engaging some kind of action based on this knowledge from these discussions, which is called the transformation orientation. So methodologically, had a constructionism, interpretism, epistemology and theoretical perspective, because we're looking at how knowledge is constructed by these participants, what the perspectives are in regards to theory of knowledge. It was a case study approach. Data was from documents such as the unit planners that they were constructing. There were focus group interviews, so I actually interviewed every single teacher in groups that were teaching the diploma course at each of the international schools. They also completed a questionnaire. The PhD was broken up into a within case analysis. There was a separate section for India, international school, China and Thailand, and then this was all brought together in the cross case analysis. And what I'll show you now is the key propositions of the cross case analysis. There were 7 key propositions. I'll just focus on the main ones because I won't have time to go through all 7. So in terms of the role, the teachers perceived that the theory of knowledge promoted a questioning attitude and promoted, interestingly, intercultural understanding by engaging those type of questions. So that really flew in the face of a lot of the literature that said that the IB homogenises cultures It doesn't allow for cultural nuances. That wasn't what the teachers were saying. So the theory of knowledge, they felt, had allowed for that ability to be culturally nuanced. They rejected the transmission approach. They did show a genuine attempt in promoting theory of knowledge discussion in the classroom. And this ultimately meant that what they were promoting was more of a transaction orientation. So going back to the models here, they were promoting more of this. There was very little evidence of them getting students to go from what they were discussing in the classroom to any call of action, whether that might mean tackling certain global problems like environmental problems, social problems, and so forth. That could be examples after discussions in engaging some kind of meaningful action. The key benefits were the fact that it improved critical thinking skills. That was perceived as a key benefit, and it also improved, and the literature labelled this as the epistemic awareness of students. So what does that mean? That means improve their ability to understand how knowledge is constructed, what are the scope and applications of knowledge, the role of language within knowledge, what's the difference of language in the sciences, in mathematics and the arts and so forth, the methodology, how do the methods of this artist differ from the methods of the scientist, and what gives us more reliable knowledge. So engaging in these type of quite high ordered questions. The historical application. I mean, a lot of this aerospace engineering talks that we saw in the first session, you can see they were fantastic talks, and there was this clear indication of, I think one of the questions of the Concorde and the new space aircraft. Here we've got a clear progress of knowledge, don't we? Historically, we can talk about scientific progress. But can we say the same thing with the arts? When we talk of progress in the arts, is the postmodern movement better than the Rococo movement or something like that? I mean, these are interesting questions that are worth getting students to think about and stimulate discussion. And that's what we mean by epistemic awareness. Challenges. The key challenges were the fact time constraints and the fact that the actual syllabus, the documents that they go by didn't have enough information. So the problem is if teachers already feel that they do too much, they're overburdened, and if you tell them, well, add this theory of knowledge course to your teaching as well, they say it's too much. I struggle to teach the physics syllabus, I struggle to teach the chemistry, the arts, I can't have these fancy discussions in it. So the notion of time constraints came as a common challenge, as well as not enough direction in the syllabus. However, one of the things that was also mentioned that became one of the key recommendations was, instead of making it as an add-on in terms of giving extra examples of how to integrate type, what this study came out with as a key recommendation is to include it as part of the formative assessment. In other words, not necessarily as an exam at the end, but if you include it as something that they already do, I mean, in the classroom they're already discussing, they're evaluating, they're analysing, engaging in these high-ordered skills, blend theory of knowledge within the theory that makes them analyse, that makes them evaluate, that makes them discuss. Make it a natural organic embedding instead of seeing it as an add-on. And that could be then added to any assessment, assignment, without necessarily feeling like an add-on. The other key challenge was the notion that prior experiences of teachers. So if teachers came from Indian board schools, for example, or from Chinese mainstream schools or Thai, although I don't want to stereotype, because these schools have, promote a lot of 21st century learning, but there is still significant gaps between an Indian mainstream school, for example, or a Chinese mainstream school to an international school. So teachers that were from the Indian board, where there is a lot of evidence to suggest there is an emphasis on rote learning and stuff like that, they were more hesitant or found it more difficult to embrace theory of knowledge in their teaching. So in order to overcome this, The first recommendation allowed for that, of formative assessment, but also letting them take root by offering them early professional development courses with the theory of knowledge, and engaging in both internal and external network events. So they became some of the key recommendations. Especially, for example, in the Thailand school, there were a lot of teachers that were the only teachers teaching that subject. So collaborating within the school became very difficult. So it was much better for them to organise network events with other international schools in the local area, or even going from, this school happened to be in Phuket. They could have gone to Bangkok and liaise with other teachers there, for example. So in a nutshell, there was a genuine attempt to promote theory of knowledge in the classroom. Teachers did see the benefits. The challenges were best overcome by not making it be seen as an add-on, but integrating it in a more organic manner into their teaching. And ultimately, it flew in the face of a lot of the criticism by certain scholars that it is that is too Western. And in fact, what we're seeing is that it's a lot of parents, students, politicians in India, in China, in Thailand, that are rejecting the mainstream education system and embracing what the International Baccalaureate is trying to do by embedding aspects like the theory of knowledge in their teaching. And ultimately, this helps to promote STEAM education, as students are suddenly not just in subject-specific learning rooms, but are making connections where you're studying art, but you're making connections with the sciences are making connection with mathematics, with ethics, with the human sciences, and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you.